Welcome to The Explainer. So if you've been reading the news lately, you've probably felt a bit of, well, economic whiplash, right? One minute we're hearing the economy's booming, and then literally the next, you're scrolling past these terrifying headlines about massive workforce reductions. Today's data presents this totally fascinating puzzle of seemingly contradictory signals about job security. We're going to unpack May's labor data to piece this whole thing together, basically cutting through the noise to figure out what's actually happening out there in the job market.
Let's just come right out of the gate with this number, 97,000. It's a staggering heavy number. This represents the total number of job cuts announced by employers just this past May. And honestly, if you have any lingering anxiety from recent news alerts popping up on your phone, this number absolutely validates that feeling. It's a jolt to the system. It's a very real number, representing very real people, and it instantly makes us wonder if the ground is shifting right beneath our feet.
Okay, let's dive into this, because we're not just looking at one isolated bad month here. We are seeing a really clear, stair-stepping upward trend in monthly layoff announcements. Just to put it in perspective, in April, we saw roughly 83,000 cuts. Step up to May, and that jumps to around 97,000. That upward trajectory is exactly the kind of thing that grabs attention and sparks those worried conversations. It shows momentum in a direction, quite frankly, no one wants to see.
And to really emphasize the severity of this headline shock, we need a historical benchmark. This is the highest level of May layoffs we have seen since 2020. Now think back to what was happening in May of 2020. The entire global economy was practically hitting a brick wall. Businesses were just shutting their doors everywhere. So to see a layoff total today that rivals that specific, highly traumatic economic era, yeah, that's a massive red flag. It's the core reason why the headlines have been so remarkably bleak recently.
Section 1. The culprit. AI in the crosshairs.
So, what is actually driving this? We know the what. The cuts are rising, obviously. But now we have to shift our focus to the why. You might naturally assume it's inflation or high interest rates squeezing corporate budgets, but the data points to a very modern phenomenon, and that's artificial intelligence. It's definitely no longer just a futuristic buzzword. It is actively and rapidly reshaping the modern workforce. Get this. For 3 straight months, a whole quarter, companies have explicitly cited AI as the leading cause of their workforce reductions. This is a profound structural shift we're watching unfold. Businesses are aggressively restructuring their operations, really pivoting toward automation and machine learning, and unfortunately, that means certain existing roles are being systematically eliminated to make way for this new tech.
When we isolate the data to find the hardest-hit industry, the picture becomes intensely focused. 38,000. That's the massive number of cuts hitting the tech sector alone. This marks its highest monthly total for layoffs since all the way back in March of 2023. And there's a deeply grim irony here, right? The exact industry that's building and deploying this transformative AI technology is simultaneously the industry shedding the highest number of jobs to accommodate it. It really paints a picture of an industry almost ruthlessly cannibalizing itself just to fund the next frontier.
Section 2. The plot twist. The tech paradox.
Now, what's really interesting here is that if we dig just one layer deeper into the source material, this bizarre paradox emerges. The exact same tech sector executing these massive, heavy reductions is simultaneously leading the charge across the entire economy in new hiring plans. Think about that for a second. They're letting tens of thousands of people go with one hand while eagerly writing up new job descriptions and hiring thousands with the other. It's wild.
So, to make sense of this, we need to define exactly what it is we're looking at. Economists actually refer to this contradiction as a mixed labor dynamic. Essentially, it's a scenario where an industry shows high rates of both job cuts and new hiring simultaneously. Briefly clarifying this contradiction is absolutely crucial because it completely complicates those fearful black and white AI is stealing all the jobs headlines we keep seeing. What we're actually witnessing isn't a shrinking industry at all, but rather a massive, aggressive reshuffling of skills and priorities. It's kind of like a factory tearing down its old assembly line just so it can build a brand new one in the exact same building.
Section 3. Zooming out. The macro labor picture. So, the crucial point is we need to step back. Let's zoom out from the scary month-to-month anomalies and the tech-specific restructuring and look at the broader year-to-date reality. When we look at overall cuts through May, we see roughly 400,000 so far this year. Now compare that to the massive 700,000 cuts baseline we saw at this exact time last year. Visually, this totally diffuses the initial panic we felt at the beginning of this explainer, doesn't it? Yes, for sure, May was an unfortunate spike, and the tech sector is going through a volatile transition.
But zooming out, overall year-to-date layoffs across the board are actually drastically lower than they were at this time last year.
And we can solidify this calming, overarching macro trend by looking directly at the official government statistics. When you look at the entire labor pool, overall layoff rates remain historically low. Plus, continuing jobless claims, which track folks who are actively receiving unemployment benefits over time, are actually sitting below last year's levels. So what does this all mean? It means that even when people do face those headline-making layoffs, they're generally finding new jobs relatively quickly. The foundational structure of the labor market is actually displaying some remarkable resilience.
There's a quote from the source data that beautifully summarizes our core takeaway today: signaling resilience despite headline cuts. You see, those micro-level headlines, they're literally designed to be shocking. And frankly, the anxieties around artificial intelligence are incredibly valid, especially if you work in one of those affected sectors. But despite all of that noise, the foundational data of the wider economy remains remarkably robust. The macro reality is holding firm, even when our daily news feeds suggest otherwise.
I want to wrap up this explainer by leaving you with a bit of a challenging question to think about. Are we reacting to the headlines or to the actual data? It's so easy to let sensational microtrends drive our economic anxiety. But as we've seen today, when you look at the grounded macro reality, a completely different story emerges. So the next time you see a terrifying news alert about massive job cuts, I hope you remember this macro data and feel empowered to really look closer at the numbers. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this. Keep questioning what you read, and I'll see you in the next one.